Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. Area 51 is a military base in a remote detachment of Edwards Air Force Base. It's located in the southern portion of Nevada in the western United States, 83 miles, 133 kilometers northwest of Las Vegas. Situated at its center on the southern shore of Groom Lake is a large military airfield. The base's primary purpose is undetermined. However, based on historical evidence, it appears to support development and testing of experimental aircraft and weapons systems. But because the base has been shrouded in secrecy and security is so stringent, it's been rumored that the facility is being used as a port for visiting spacecraft, or a venue for alien autopsies, or a lab where captured UFOs are reverse engineered to America's military advantage. On this episode of The Conspiracy Show, we'll attempt to unravel the mystery of Area 51. We're about to meet a ufologist, a historian, and an Area 51 activist who maintain it's quite probable many of the highly advanced craft witnesses have reported seeing flying above the desert around Groom Lake or Area 51 are powered by back-engineered UFO propulsion systems. Also, they'll affirm that an Area 51 whistleblower, Bob Lazar, is credible. Lazar claims to have worked inside Area 51 and to have witnessed and worked on anti-gravitic propulsion devices, recovered flying discs, even alien bodies. We'll also hear from two individuals who belong to an organization called the International Roadrunners. Our two Roadrunners will explain that what actually goes on inside Area 51 has nothing to do with aliens or flying saucers. Me? I just want the truth, and I'm willing to follow it wherever it leads. It is time to redefine reality.
Over the years, stories circulated that the Air Force and the NSA and probably the CIA were reverse engineering downed UFOs at Area 51. And so it's become a cult magnet in the United States out there near Rachel, Nevada. It's a few hours out of Las Vegas. It's not too far from Rachel. It's on these lonely country, dusty roads. And over the years, even though Area 51 started off as a gunnery range in World War II, Area 51 has expanded, taking up more and more space because as the rumors of UFO reverse engineering were going on, Area 51 began acquiring more and more land. So the only place to really get a good look at what's going on in Area 51 is to climb all the way up Tickaboo Peak and look down. But you better have a big telescope.
They seem to have moved very advanced, what many people believe is extraterrestrial technology, into the facility sometime in 1987, 1988. This is called Area 51 or Red Square or the Box because no standard military jets or flights are actually allowed to ever fly over it. Area 51 was originally called the Docktown Strip, the Groom Dry Lake Bed, and the names of the places have changed. It was then divided up into a series of projects like Dreamland, like S4. They seem to have moved very advanced, what many people believe is extraterrestrial technology, into the facility sometime in 1987, 1988.
Before 3 years ago, I would say the only evidence you had that UFOs were being reverse engineered at Area 51 was Bob Lazar's testimony and whatever John Lear said. And the videos from George Knapp, John Lear, and Bob Lazar, and the eyewitness testimony of Gene Huff. That was it. But then we went there, and we set up surveillance cameras all around the perimeter. And we were there for a couple of days. And you know what we saw flying over Area 51? We saw a UFO. And at first we thought, maybe it's some crazy advanced jet, who knows? If I hadn't seen a UFO with my own eyes, I would have said it's just testimony.
A majority of the technology that was actually recovered at Roswell was then taken to Hangar 18 along with the alien bodies. So there's 2 ships involved in the crash that people don't understand. There was the Roswell crash that actually had the debris field, and then there was the Corona crash in which they actually recovered the physical bodies and the majority of the technology. In regards to how Area 51 is linked to it, literally the technology of the latter half of the 20th century you can trace directly to the Roswell crash. Majority of this was actually taken to the Pentagon, and the Foreign Technology Division of the Pentagon, which was run by General Arthur Trudeau, and he had an assistant named Colonel Philip Corso. And Phil Corso was the military governor of Italy. He wrote a book before he died called The Day After Roswell. So you could actually then look at lasers, solid state technology, night vision technology, and that's not even beginning to talk about the energy potential of what actually powered the craft itself. So all of this came out of the Foreign Technology Division of the Pentagon. How Area 51 is linked to it is at one point, the people at 5-1, which is what it's called, it's not called Area 51, they just call it 5-1. The people at 5-1 asked the people at Wright-Patterson if they could take all of the various downed craft, and once we get one of these craft, we take it in to study it, and the guys at 5-1 asked them if they could then take a look at the ships to figure out how they work.
The first challenge for the folks at Area 51 was reverse engineering. Not UFOs per se, but reverse engineering of Soviet aircraft. That was the stated mission of Nellis Air Force Base, Groom Lake, Papoose Lake in Area 51. But ultimately, the stories began circulating mainly because of Bob Lazar, who was a propulsion expert who said that he worked at Area 51 about flying saucer technology, the kinds of technologies that we were trying to reverse engineer from downed craft. And that's been the main magnet for UFO enthusiasts.
The Roadrunners organization is made up of former military personnel, CIA officials, and defense contractors, many of whom worked on advanced aircraft like the U-2 spy plane inside Groom Lake, better known as Area 51.
When these aircraft were being developed, these aircraft were extremely fast, very high altitude. And at night, in certain cases at night, they take off, you'd see an afterburner. And then within seconds, it was miles away and the afterburner would light again. So, and then lights would come on, they'd have some lights on it, and all of a sudden that became a UFO. And the UFO was an unidentified flying object. And I guess at that point, the Central Intelligence Agency decided that aliens were a better cover story. And so they developed, the CIA developed the alien story.
SR-71 was made out of, a little side note with the story, it was made out of Russian titanium that was imported into the United States with a false flag company because Russian titanium was the best titanium available for what the SR needed to be built from. Unpainted, and at those extreme temperatures, extreme altitudes, and extreme speeds, it would glow red. And many of the test flights can be proven. As for dates for flights and a date for the Project Blue Book reports, they can be coincided to prove that that's what people were actually seeing, is an ultra-fast aircraft glowing red hot from its altitude and speed.
They were 50 years ahead of time in 1955. So it's like, I guess the Wright brothers are going by and a Spitfire goes by the Wright brothers at 400 miles an hour. That would be a similar scenario. The technology was so advanced at that time, and I believe the technology is continuing at about 40 or 50 years in advance.
The CIA, other intelligence groups, perhaps the Air Force, the Navy, were quite willing to allow this whole UFO story to develop because it proved a useful cover.
Yes.
It's very distracting.
Yes.
Have they, to your knowledge, or would you care to speculate as to whether they have purposely leaked certain documents relating to UFOs in order to facilitate that?
Well, I'd prefer not to.
I wouldn't talk about that.
So I understand the MO might be also that if something, if that crash was witnessed by someone, they might then, they being the Air Force or whomever, plant a story that it was a UFO.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
In the matters of national
Yeah,
security,
yeah.
there are no boundaries. Whatever is needed to protect the national security, they will make up whatever stories they have to.
If this was a cover story to cover for advanced aircraft, this really backfired. One of the problems with that is that everything is need to know. So if you're a roadrunner and you're working on SR-71 or whatever, you don't have a need to know about what's going on with UFOs. That's one thing. If they were cleared and if they were briefed on the thing, the question is, would you violate your security clearance? If you were briefed, would you violate your security clearance and tell us that the UFO thing was real? They know security, they cannot. If they were briefed, they cannot. They have to go with the cover story.
Tell me about Bob Lazar.
Bob Lazar claimed to be a scientist who had worked at Los Alamos Labs. It was later confirmed by George Knapp, who was a major investigative reporter in Las Vegas, that he did work at Los Alamos. Lazar was sort of an expert with jet engines, and he had a Honda car that had a jet engine in it. And what had happened was he was on the front page of the paper in the Los Alamos area. He's taken up to Area 51. He's first interviewed.
Bob Lazar is a very funny guy. On the one hand, he is a propulsion expert. I mean, he was developing his own propulsion system for cars. He was working on exotic propulsion systems. He claimed to have a degree in physics from MIT. He was hired to work at Area 51. Bob Lazar was being asked to work on a reverse engineering procedure for alien, otherworldly propulsion systems. And his introduction to that was fascinating because they said to him, okay, look, we want to show you what this is all about. So they're walking Bob Lazar down a corridor and they point to a doorway, and the doorway has a glass window in it. And they say, look in the window. Bob Lazar looks in the window and he sees a flickering candle. The person with him says, watch carefully. He watches carefully and the candle stops flickering. It's frozen. And Bob Lazar says, how did you stop the flame? And the person says to Bob Lazar, we never stopped the flame. What we did was we shot a beam of element 115 at that candle, and the candle is still flickering, but time itself is stopped. Element 115 is bringing the candle through time by rushing time towards it. So for you, standing outside that frame, it looks like time has stopped. Hasn't stopped. That candle is moving through time. That's the propulsion system we want you to reverse engineer. Well, Bob Lazar was flabbergasted.
And when he goes to the test site, most of the people there are working on aircraft. They're working on advanced aircraft engines. Lazar's background is engines. So do they put him up on the test site with what thousands of people who are working on jet engines, advanced aircraft? No, they put him at S4. And S4 was a place where they had about 24 people working. The story they told Lazar was that there was an accident, some scientist who got killed, he was a replacement for this scientist. So they put him up at S4 instead of putting him working on rocket engines, and he goes to the area where they're doing the UFO research.
S4 goes down about 5 levels or so. And in the upper level, you had 9 very advanced aircraft. There were people that say that these were either extraterrestrial ships that we got in some kind of deal or had been shot down. There was one craft that had a big hole actually burned directly through it. And then you go down a second level. You have the top level, which is basically these 9 craft or ships, which they are back engineering and trying to figure out how to fly and make work. Mostly what they're doing is trying to figure out how not only the ships fly as far as the power source, but that the ships can not only fly in space, but also seem to be able to dilute and bend time at the same time that you're flying. There were people, the original test pilots that got in these things would just get up and make them hover, and 2 minutes would go by for them, and hours would go by for the ground crew outside. So there was a very odd time dilation going on. The second level was primarily for the various scientists on the base of the facility. The third level was for the security personnel. The security personnel outnumbered the scientists by something like 4 to 1. And then level 5 was very interesting because part of it was called an ambassadorial suite, where they were actually keeping living extraterrestrials, and the rest of it was primarily dedicated to what they call xenobiology, which is the study of extraterrestrial life forms. And they had a collection, a menagerie, if you will, of these ET life forms in glass tubes with metal strips in sort of a bluish liquid.
So Bob Lazar tells his story to the great John Lear, famous CIA pilot, the guy who says he flew Bush all around and everything. Highly regarded pilot, test pilot, has a lot of awards. So he tells a story to John Lear. Well, then they tell the story to KLAS TV correspondent George Knapp. Let's go out to Area 51. Let's see a flying saucer. And one of the most famous, one of the most celebrated events, John Lear, George Knapp, Bob Lazar out at Area 51 capturing UFOs on video. I saw this with my own eyes. We saw the UFO. In fact, I saw it with my own eyes from our own surveillance cameras.
I'll step out of the line a little bit with Bob Lazar. And it has crossed my mind that it is possible that Bob Lazar was sent for disinformation purposes, to distract what was going on at the area. I have no doubt that Bob Lazar is an extremely intelligent person. I have no doubt that Bob Lazar may have experienced some classified things, as most of us that have worked in that type of environment have. But there is a part of me that believes that Bob Lazar was intentionally led for misinformation or to guide things away from what was going on at Groom Lake, which I don't have a problem with that.
So you're convinced that some, most, all unidentified flying objects can be explained by sophisticated aircraft?
Yes.
I believe that too. I believe not only can be explained, but on the other side of that, we may never be explained to the public.
The individuals that we've been involved with see things that most people don't even dream about. Okay, these are very unique people, and they had the opportunity. Okay, being selected had the opportunity to carry out this type of research and development. So out of millions of people, there's a handful of individuals that are capable, and you just need to have the establishment available and the funding available to see this thing through. And so, with all due respect to the Central Intelligence Agency, they had the funding available and the security available to take on individuals capable of producing incredible technology that was so far advanced.
So there is a great story that the United States government created the mystique of UFOs to cover up their own development of top secret weapons, and that's partly true. But the funny part about it is it's true, but it's a cover story to cover a top secret event that came into being as a result of a true story about UFOs. As one CIA agent once told me, it's a great thing we have UFOs. If we didn't, we'd have to invent them.
Our skeptics on this episode are members of the International Roadrunners Organization. They may or may not have worked inside Area 51. They're not allowed to tell us, but they have been authorized to tell us certain things. We've just heard them reveal that technological achievements and breakthroughs being made inside Area 51, like propulsion systems and cloaking devices and advanced aircraft, have nothing to do with aliens and flying saucers. But they insist the technology and the science is every bit as mind-blowing and decades beyond what we might presently think is possible. Our ufologist, historian, and Area 51 advocate, on the other hand, would have you believe the best explanation for such advances in aeronautics, weapon systems, and propulsion systems is the back-engineered alien technology hypothesis. Quite frankly, I find either scenario absolutely mind-blowing. If inside Area 51, scientists are developing anti-gravity devices or spacecraft that can approach the speed of light or can appear invisible to the human eye, I don't care if we got the technology from aliens or whether we mere Earthlings created it ourselves. I just want to know more. Like, what else do we got? And now, I'd like to know what you think. You can get in touch with me through the website, theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid. Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. Something crashed on Foster's Ranch in the desert near Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947. Eyewitnesses and UFO researchers insist that what followed was a U.S. military-led recovery of an extraterrestrial spacecraft, including alien pilots. The U.S. military insists that what was actually recovered was debris from a top-secret experimental high-altitude surveillance balloon. For some conspiracy-minded, the UFO incident at Roswell is ground zero for the UFO truth embargo perpetrated by the government, the military, intelligence groups, and private corporations benefiting from back-engineered alien technology. Tonight, The Conspiracy Show investigates the Roswell UFO incident. We'll hear from several top Roswell investigators who'll present their best evidence that the military did in fact cover up the crash and recovery of an alien spacecraft and the extraterrestrial victims of that crash. And finally, a former U.S. Air Force pilot and astronomer who says the phenomenon known as the Roswell UFO incident is much to do about nothing. Me, I'm like you. I just want the truth. And I'm willing to follow the truth wherever it leads. It is time to redefine reality. Genetic enigma or a human-alien hybrid? That's how cynical I am now about the process. Is it possible technology can alter weather patterns created by the going to make it? Has been engineered by the Illuminati? There's no doubt. I'm here just outside Phoenix, Arizona with Don Schmidt, a co-author of 3 books on Roswell, including Witness to Roswell, uncovering the government's biggest cover-up. Don, thanks for joining me.
Richard, pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
There are so many varying accounts of what happened, when it happened, who saw it happen. Can you help sort that out by giving me a very brief timeline, which includes dates, locations, and the principal figures involved?
I need to initially point out that most of the contradictions come from the researchers, the investigators involved. They don't come from the witnesses. The eyewitnesses who saw something come down through the severe lightning storm the late evening of July 3rd, seeing what appeared to be a flaming orb of light arcing downward as far as in the outlying desert region. And then the rancher himself, Mac Brazel, discovering the debris field the very next morning.
Explain what Mac Brazel actually found on Foster's Ranch.
Well, it's quite clear that Max found debris and bodies. He actually used expletives to explain the fact that, damn it all, they're not human. He did find something of an extraterrestrial nature, and he made it very clear to anybody that he spoke to after that, until the threats came forward and shut him down, that it was in fact an extraterrestrial craft.
We know that rancher Mac Brazel heard an explosive sound. He's out in the middle of nowhere, you understand. He lives out in the boonies, no electricity, no radio, no newspaper, no telephone, so he can't call somebody and say, hey, you won't believe what I found, kind of thing. So he's telling the guys at the store.
There were pieces being passed around of the wreckage because nobody could identify the unusual characteristics of this strange material that the rancher had discovered just that very morning.
That's when he hears about flying saucers, and he also hears that there's a reward available for pieces of one. Recover a flying saucer, a couple $1,000, which is a lot of money then. Everybody says you ought to go in to Roswell, to the sheriff's office. Maybe you can catch your reward.
He arrives at the Chavez County Sheriff, George Wilcox, and there too, neither the sheriff or his deputies can identify this material. And the sheriff then in turn contacts and actually speaks with Major Jesse Marcel. This is all on Sunday, July 6th.
Okay, let's go to the press release. Roswell Army Airfield Public Information Office releases this press release. Give me the details, the content of that press release.
It doesn't name the rancher. It doesn't say where this has happened. It just says north of Roswell, but it states specifically that they have recovered it. They have it in their possession. When in reality, there's a debris field of 3/4 of a mile long, hundreds of feet wide, still out there.
Stanton, I want to get a sense of what was happening in Roswell, the kind of pressure that was being applied to the citizenry. Even Mac Brazel, in his July 9th, 1947 story with the Roswell Daily Record, completely flipped and changed his story and was talking about a weather balloon. What happened to Mac Brazel? Who got to him?
We know that Mac led Jesse Marcel and Cabot out to the ranch on Sunday, the 6th. So they came back late on the 7th. At the end of the article on the July 9th paper, the rancher says, if there's one thing I'm certain of, I know it was not a balloon. If I ever find another one, I'm not going to report it either. The military went and got Mac.
They've nabbed the rancher. They've grabbed Mac Brazel, and they're holding him incommunicado at the same time. So you have all this going down.
Mac Brazel was kept at the base for a few days.
They would keep him at the base for about 5 days, even after the weather balloon explanation comes out.
Now suddenly it was recovered on June 14th. And he said it was just a bundle of sticks and other stuff. So he lied. And also it appears that, from comments many people have made, that he suddenly came into a little money.
Roswell, New Mexico. This case has captured the imagination of the public for many years. Why is it that this story just won't die?
Well, of course, it wasn't a story for almost 31 years where none of the UFO believers and UFOlogy even paid any attention to it.
The intelligence officer from the 509 bomb group would be Jesse Marcel.
Yes.
According to his account, when he went out to the debris field and picked up pieces of this material and he crumpled it in his hand and it seemed to have some special properties, I would assume that an intelligence officer from the 509 would be a trained observer. How could he have been so mistaken?
Well, first off, he wasn't a trained observer. That's the first thing. The second thing is he probably was handling material he'd never seen before.
He had found balloons. And that's something you have to understand. Weather balloons were common. Jesse Marcel had worked with him. The notion that he wouldn't recognize a weather balloon is absurd.
I think you'd have to question why an alien spacecraft would be made out of mylar paper, balsa wood sticks, and neoprene rubber. I wouldn't want to travel anywhere in that. But that's what he picked up.
What struck him was that there was nothing conventional there. He's seen plane crashes. And you got propellers, you got wires, you got vacuum tubes back then, you got little things that say made in Oshkosh valves. If he'd served in the Pacific, you know what airplanes looked like.
And Blanchard, the base commander, he goes up the chain of command, calls his boss, General Roger Ramey. Well, he immediately contacts the Pentagon. And General Clements McMullen turns right around and calls up Ramey's chief of staff, Colonel Thomas DuBose, and orders him to have that material from Roswell sent directly to their attention at the Pentagon.
If it was just a weather balloon, why would that attract the attention of General Roger Ramey? Why were all of these military types so interested and involved in this crap?
Well, Ramey wasn't interested in this until they put out a press release on the front page of the paper and it became national news. Then I dare say he was not pleased when he found out. And in some way, we have sort of a public relations debacle where somebody says this is something that it's not. That's why he ordered a new press release be released saying this turned out not to be a flying disc at all. And that's why this second press release got turned out. Everything else is a story. There's no evidence to support it. There's no corroborating evidence to support it. There's no Air Force documents to support it. Nothing.
It's the only case that has two big fat reports about it. The Roswell report, Truth versus Fiction in the New Mexico desert. The Air Force unfortunately provided the fiction. They said that was their last word on the subject. Short time later, second volume, the Roswell report, case closed. The crazy thing is the New York Times put it on the front page. Explanation.
You've interviewed over 500 people
Yes.
in your research, 2,000 interviews. Talk to me about some of the most compelling eyewitness testimony that we haven't discussed thus far.
One of the surviving witnesses to the bodies, he talked to us. It took us months to finally get him to talk, telling us about the bodies. And the tears are streaming down his face.
I did talk to a cameraman who was flown from Washington out there to the base, and his job was to take pictures. They had a tent, and there were bodies inside. And they'd open the tent, he'd take a picture, pull out the plate, hand it to the guy, kept doing this.
Tell me about the man who ran the mortuary in Roswell, Glenn Dennis.
We have multiple witnesses, even down to a nurse, who said that she placed the order for the caskets to come in. So there was a request for child-sized caskets.
He gets a call, there's a lot of activity going on. Goes inside, sees a nurse that he knows.
Who quickly warned him to get off the base immediately, that something big had happened, and that he was then physically accosted by a red-haired captain and a black sergeant who threatened him, warned him that if he didn't get off the base immediately and keep quiet as to what he had even suspected or heard, that they'd be digging his bones out of the sand, as the one said to him.
So he sees the nurse the next day, and she tells him that she had been asked to help out in a, I don't know if it was a dissection or an autopsy, who knows. And she described to him what the bodies looked like. There was a sketch done. And the length of the upper arm was greater than the lower arm, which is different from what it is for us. And 4 fingers. It smelled to high heaven.
What are your thoughts on Glenn Dennis?
I think all of these are just stories. There's no corroborating evidence to any of this, but when you start talking about anything other than the debris, Phil, the raw wind target and the weather balloon, there's no evidence to indicate any of that's true.
And when he went back to talk to her again in a few days, she was gone. Shipped out, supposedly to England, and supposedly there'd been an airplane crash and she was killed.
Well, I think what happened was the amount of attention that was paid to that debris. Hundreds of soldiers coming in, scouring his land, the land on the Foster Ranch. And all of the events surrounding that quite clearly proved that the United States Air Force brought into play individuals, officers, to come into the community to lay down threats among the community that this information should not be spoken about.
It's total confabulation, it's total people making up stories.
There is another witness. Tell me about the former lieutenant governor.
He was lieutenant governor at that time, senator. He became Senator Joseph Montoya. He had close friends in Roswell that were part of his campaign. Montoya just happened to be at the base at the time. You know, it shocked him. It upset him. In fact, he even, described how one of them was alive. that he could hear it moaning, and that its knee was rocking back and forth.
There was a number of projects where they were testing, what would happen if you ejected at high altitude and so forth. And they were dropping these dummies. They were about 6 feet tall. And they'd go out with these trucks with cranes on them because these dummies were very heavy. This equipment was and they'd put them on stretchers to carry them around. And they really did this. We got photographs of all this.
Get me out of here. Get me the hell out of here right away. Don't take me to the motel. Just take me back to one of your houses. I need a drink. I need something right away. And he finally blurted out, "You won't believe it. You won't believe it. They weren't human."
Don, it's alleged that Chavez County Sheriff George Wilcox had the unenviable task of going to some of the locals.
Yes.
And threatening.
Yes, yes.
Is there any truth to that?
Yes, there is. We believe it's the exact reason that he did not run for re-election. He was used to, visit all the civilians locally within Roswell to re-emphasize those very threats, that it was out of his hands, he couldn't protect them, and that the military informed him that if they didn't cooperate, if they didn't keep their mouths shut about the true nature of the incident, that they even risked death.
The Air Force, under its official status, would have never done such a thing, would have never told anybody or threatened anybody. It's against the Constitution. It's against the Constitution for a sheriff to threaten anybody. Now, did he feel intimidated and perhaps go out and do something? I can't say. I don't know. What I'm saying is, if anybody in the Air Force ordered him to do that, that would have been a court-martial offense. If he had gone out and threatened anything, it'd be a violation of state law and federal law.
Barbara Duggar was the sheriff's granddaughter. She was staying with her grandmother, the sheriff's wife. The sheriff was dead. And the grandmother says, Barbara, I guess I never told you why your grandfather didn't run for sheriff. It was an elected position, didn't rerun for sheriff. She said when that crash happened, the government came to him and said, if you ever talk about what you saw, we will kill you and we will kill your family. And the granddaughter's horrified. Did you believe them? Barbara, I was there. I believed them. Now, these are not the kind of people who are making up stories for popular consumption. There's no point in it at all. But there were threats. I found another guy who was in the medical unit and apparently helped stuff bodies in body bags at another crash. And he said what got to him was not that they told him to shut up. He could understand that. But that they threatened his family. If you ever talk, we'll get you and we'll get your family. And he thought that was going a bit far, But this was not uncommon, is what I'm saying.
Well, certainly, as we described running this race with The Undertaker, the attrition rate of the World War II generation only intensifying day to day. And we're running out of time. But the ones most apt to talk, because they don't have pensions at stake, they're the ones that are now on their deathbeds. They're all talking about the ship, the unusual material, about the little men, and as one of the officers said, they sure weren't from Texas.
What crashed in the New Mexican desert in July of 1947? And what did the military recover from the debris field? Was it a vehicle of extraterrestrial origin and alien corpses, or an experimental high-altitude surveillance balloon?
Project Mogul was a top-secret classified program to see if they could detect sonic waves for nuclear explosions by the Russians. It turns out that one of these they lost, and what more than likely happened, it came down, the wind tore it all to pieces, and all the pieces of the balloons and these radar targets got scattered by the wind all over the place. It probably looked very impressive, but it was mylar pregnated paper, balsa wood, and the neoprene rubber from the weather balloons.
Is it possible that the U.S. military accidentally told the truth in the first press release and then quickly changed their story and pulled off one of the greatest cover-ups in modern history?
Why bring in hundreds of soldiers to scour the Foster Ranch, to walk arm in arm, to pick up little pieces of everything? Why have riflemen sitting on top of the mesas? Why bring in bombers to put bodies in crates? Why do all of these things have to come about just because the United States Air Force is trying to cover up a weather balloon? It just doesn't make any sense.
Why would an intelligence officer from the Roswell Army Airfield, who helped gather up the bits and pieces from the crash site, swear it was nothing made on this earth? Why do family members of the former sheriff of Chaves County swear he was forced to threaten residents to keep quiet about what they saw? Why are elderly witnesses to the Roswell incident, including retired military personnel, coming forward as they near the end of their lives and telling investigators it was a UFO, there were alien bodies, there was a cover-up? Why? Over what? A weather balloon? Doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And now, I'd like to know what you think. You can contact us here at The Conspiracy Show through our website, www.theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid. Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. Did a vessel of extraterrestrial origin touch down near a U.S. Air Force base in England over Christmas in 1980? Tonight, we'll meet several of those witnesses, including one who claims to have walked up to the landed craft and touched it. We'll also meet a UFO investigator who insists the evidence proves that a vessel of extraterrestrial origin touched down in Rendlesham Forest in 1980. We'll also meet a skeptic who insists there are numerous plausible explanations for this event, none of them which include a flying saucer piloted by an alien. Our mission is to investigate these claims and follow the truth wherever it may lead. It is time to redefine reality. Genetic enigma or a human alien hybrid?
There was at least two gunmen. One was firing from the nose.
Extreme technology can alter weather patterns.
Created by the corporation. The strain, not the answer.
Engineered by the Illuminati.
There's no doubt.
I'm here in Phoenix with Jim Peniston, U.S. Air Force retired Staff Sergeant at Royal Air Force Base in Bentwaters during the 1980 Rendlesham incident. Jim, welcome to The Conspiracy Show. Thanks for your time.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
I want you to give me a quick thumbnail sketch or a timeline of what you saw, the date, where you were, and what your observations were.
Yeah, I was working the midnight shift on the 25th of December, 1980. I was in charge of security for RAF Woodbridge, England. And around 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, I was called to go to the East Gate. I arrived there, and Sergeant Steffens briefed me that they had something going on in the woods. I looked out there. It appeared to be a dome of light, looked like a fire. I said, "What, do you hear a crash?" And he says, "No, Jim, it didn't crash." So I said, "What, did it land?" And he goes, "Yeah, something like that." I went back to the gate shack. I called into my control centers. They're checking to see the radar to see if there was a tracking or anything like that. In a couple minutes, they come back online and they say, we had a unidentified bogey about 15 minutes ago, lost contact over RF Woodbridge. We deployed quickly off base. It was only like 300 yards, and there was like a bright white light, a triangular craft that appeared in front of us. It measured approximately 9 feet long, triangular in shape, black glass looking, metal feel, but very, very smooth. When I came around to the far side, I see there was some type of pictorial glyphs on it. I was actually hoping that it would say United States Air Force or NASA or something like that.
It's a rainy, cold day here in Rendlesham Forest. We're just outside the old Woodbridge Air Force Base, and I'm here to meet Larry Warren, the original whistleblower of the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident. He's here to relive those strange events that happened over 30 years ago.
I saw what I saw. I never saw anything in the air except the light come in, and then an object, something happened, and there was a structured object on the ground. And we drove down here and turned left, stopped, and then moved on foot through much like this. And there was no snow on the ground. And I mean, the forest was this all the way through. This is what you're going through in pitch black night, flashlights, radios going. And I still stand by, and I'm not alone in it. There was something alive in association with it. It was just there.
When you say it was there, you mean you felt a presence?
No, I saw it. I saw it. Definitely 3 things. So,
inside the craft?
Outside. Lieutenant Bonnie Tamplin kind of lost it a bit and wouldn't come back out here.
I'm here with Peter Robbins, co-author of Left at Eastgate, a first-hand account of the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident. Peter, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, Richard.
Larry's story is truly remarkable. Some might say out of this world, as all the witnesses' stories are. Why did you believe him?
Good question. I have to be a skeptic because I know this is real beyond a reasonable doubt from the work I've done. Whatever happened to him in that field and happened to him after with more terrestrial sources controlled and ran his life.
So what do you think they saw out there?
I think they saw technology and a presence from parts unknown.
I'm here in southern Arizona at the Grasslands Observatory with James McGaha, retired U.S. Air Force pilot, astronomer, and skeptic. James, welcome to The Conspiracy Show.
Welcome. Glad to be here.
I want to talk to you about the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident.
Basically, what happened was some lights were seen, and the first night, the lights caused the airmen to want to go off base and investigate the lights. And they took some equipment. They took a radiac meter and a starlight scope and some other things. Colonel Halt did a tape recording, a handheld cassette tape recording that night of what he was seeing, which I have a copy of, and it's very interesting to listen to the tape.
148, we're hearing very strange sounds out of the farmers burning our animals. It's very, very active, making an awful lot of noise. Okay, stop. Hey, this is eerie. This is strange.
And I could hear all the transmissions in real time that you hear on the Halt audio tape.
See it? Okay, fine. The center spot. Well, it really isn't center. It's slightly off center. It's right there. There it is, right there. Focused? Okay. Looking around spot number 1 through the starlight scope.
A starlight scope is an image intensifier for low light. It intensifies low light. It does not detect energy. It does not detect infrared. All it does is intensify light. Then he looks at the Orford Lighthouse, which he doesn't realize is the Orford Lighthouse.
We are getting an indication of a heat source coming out of that center spot. You just saw a light where? Where? Right in this position here. Straight ahead, in between the tree. There it is again. Heat or some form of energy. It's hardly heat at this stage of the game. It is looking directly overhead. Watch, straight ahead off my flashlight there. So there it is. Hey, I see it too. What is it? We don't know, sir. So can I get some of it? Yeah, it's a strange, small red light. You'll see maybe a quarter to half mile, maybe further out. I'm going to switch off. The light is gone now. Is it back again? Yes, sir.
And so it gives all this weird, bizarre looking, because he's looking at this incredibly bright object. People have argued he didn't see the lighthouse, but he's looking straight at, he says what, he's looking at an angle of 110 degrees.
About 110 degrees, getting a reading of about 4 clicks. Yes, sir. Yeah, but excuse me. No, it's dying. No, it's dying. I think it's something other than the ground. I think it's something that's something variable. A tree right over. We have found the first night bird we've seen. We're about 150 or 200 yards from the site. Everything else is just deathly calm. There is no doubt about it. There's some type of strange flashing red light ahead. It's yellow. I saw a yellow tinge in it too. Weird.
He has a period of about 5 seconds, and of course the Orford Lighthouse is a period of 5 seconds, and it's at 110 degrees from where he was. So either he was looking at the lighthouse, or he was looking at a UFO with a flashing light with 5 seconds. It was hovering directly above the lighthouse.
What other possible explanation could there be aside from the Orford Ness Lighthouse?
Oh, well, when you get into the explanation, it becomes quite complicated. Let's talk about the first night when the airmen went out. They see lights, they see various lights. They probably saw the Orford Lighthouse, but they saw something else. They saw something with a blue bank of lights, with a bright light on top of it and some other things. And what is not widely publicized is that somebody called the British police. And there was a British police car driving around out there on the farm roads, and very likely they were seeing the flashing strobe lights of this police car because it has a bank of blue lights on top of it. But once they got out there with the police car and the Orford Lighthouse, that's probably what they saw. They never got close to it in their reports, and they were ordered to come back to base. The second night, they go out, and they don't see anything initially. And then, of course, somebody says they see a light. And then they call Halt, who was at a party, and Halt decides to organize a team and go out. And then all of a sudden, they see this flashing light, which is the Orford Lighthouse. And then, at some point, Halt looks up at the sky, and about 10 degrees off the horizon in the north and the south, he sees 3 bright objects. And they're just stationary objects. And then he says they look like they're shooting off beams or dancing and so forth. And all they are is stars.
It's the biggest insult in the world. We're highly trained, some even more trained than others, but we all knew, here we were. They don't put idiots out here.
Colonel Halt, when this happened, again, a respected military personage, retired 12 years later as a full colonel. This hurt his career, and that's not conjecture or guesswork. He told us.
When they retraced their steps, lo and behold, they end up where Halt says nothing ever happened. Seems everything happened there. Interesting.
These men's lives were changed forever. I'm sure some of them, most of them, would have rather just done what the service wanted them to do, which is just forget about it.
Walk me through the period that begins with your debriefing and the threats that were made against you.
Well, we came off duty. I went immediately back to my room, my dorm room. So the next thing I know is that I get a note under my door, and they said I had to go out to the Chief of Security Police's office.
And that afternoon they were debriefed. We're convinced it was disinformation, which is not a lie. It is a very skillful mixture of truth and fiction to produce a certain result. I'm convinced in this case to scare the hell out of the men involved.
Well, actually a guy to my side said, what would happen if we talked about it? The people are already... They say like this, the guy said, with a smile, bullets are cheap.
You know, there's this idea that somehow people can be threatened and all kinds of stuff. In all my career in the Air Force, I never saw anybody threatened.
Were you taken to an underground base and debriefed?
I think that was narco-hypnosis. I was taken to something subterranean to believe they exist on the base.
I think for me that's very important. He was missing for, my understanding, is between 24, 36 hours. Men who asked where he was were told he was on a leave. Halt has always said that Larry was meddled with. Yes, he was. So were all of the men. Is there an underground complex there? I'm convinced there is.
We signed pre-written statements saying we were off duty, and we had a sign. I said, that's not true. And we saw some lights, we were off duty. But we had no sign, you know, that's what we had to do.
Larry continued to inquire quietly on his own. I think was identified as a potential problem. So much so that at a certain point he realized it was probably prudent to leave the service.
We had the highest rate of suicide in NATO on that base.
After?
After. There was a captain who hung himself. It was, you know, you don't hear any of these officers talk about it because they're riding the pension wave, you know. The worst element was the government you were serving wasn't what you were serving, and there was a dark element there. Your world is not the world you live in. You know it every day. The guy working next to you probably doesn't. And you sit there and you go, oh, I know things you definitely don't know.
Larry outed everyone, and that broke the story ultimately in England. He went on to become the whistleblower.
And I think back then they said, well, you know, people say certain things in 1981 society. You know, you'd be laughed, you know, you're a village idiot. It's not that way anymore. You know, people are very open-minded. People are more open to say, well, whereas they would have said, oh, crazy. Nowadays they go, well, maybe I'll tell you about something I saw.
And then the other witnesses started to come forward years later, and it's now history.
James Penniston claimed that he went up to this craft. It had landed. He walked around it. He touched it. What do you make of his account?
But I'm highly skeptical of that. He now claims he touched it, and recently claimed he's getting some kind of binary download to his brain.
I was like blinded mentally blinded, where I couldn't see, and all I could see is like ones and zeros flashing in my head, to the point where I couldn't see what was in front of me. As it dissipated, takes off up to treetop level. When the craft lifted off, there was no noise. There was no air displacement, which was strange. It momentarily stops, turns, and is gone in a blink of an eye. Since then, you know, I gave that question to people you know, that are in the know. They said, well, a blink of an eye would equate to 5,000 miles an hour. So that's pretty fast.
At what point, Jim, did you start writing the ones and zeros, the binary code that you received in a flash?
The following day, the 27th, when I woke up early. I woke up at like 4 in the morning. And I mean, I was beside myself over what happened the day before, wondering just how real everything was.
If you look at his original report, all he says is he saw lights. The lights never got close to him. He says the lights moved away from him. He never touched anything. What he said in his official signed report is not what he's saying now. And you have to wonder, what does that mean?
To go ahead and report that to anybody or back at the base would just be ludicrous. That I would have got relieved of duty. So I never said nothing. And I got these ones and zeros going. I really thought I was sort of losing it, you know. So I started writing them down in the notebook, and when I did that, it felt better. I thought it was all going to be just gibberish. I really did. Then I get the information back, and it finds out it's actually has meaning, and there's words and a message.
And the gist of that message was what?
The general meaning of the message was that it was a probe, and it was here for exploration of humanity, and it was time-related with the fourth coordinate, meaning that's a time-related code. And so the message indicated that this was from time travelers.
How do you feel about this whole incident 3 decades later? Are you still passionate about what happened?
We have questions, you know, that most likely are never going to get answered. A lot of the information is sitting in the archives that, you know, with the United States. I mean, that's going to remain classified, I'm sure.
Talk to me about what this has cost you coming forward.
What does it cost? A couple marriages, a couple career directions could have been good, probably. Oh, a million things, you know. I mean, your worldview is never going to be the same.
The other witnesses and I have talked, and we think that we're just going to have to live with it. I don't think we're ever going to have the full answers on Rendlesham. I think it's going to be not in our lifetime anyway.
Does part of you wish it never happened?
I was asked a long time ago a very good question. They said, if you could change one thing about the Rendlesham Forest incident, what would it be? What one thing would it be? And I said, well, that's easy. I said, on the 24th of December, when they asked me if I wanted to work the Christmas schedule or the New Year's schedule, I would have said, I want to work the New Year's schedule. That's the only thing I would have. That was a 6-second, maybe 7-second decision that changed my whole life.
It should be noted that neither Jim Penniston or Larry Warren, the two witnesses I talked to, have ever referred to what they saw as a UFO or alien spacecraft. Larry Warren is an incredibly sincere and likable individual. He's paid dearly for talking openly about what he saw over 30 years ago. 2 broken marriages, ridiculed and scorned by his peers and the media. Why would he keep putting himself out there? He certainly hasn't profited from all this. I believe something happened to him, something nefarious. I believe whatever he saw resulted in his being interrogated, perhaps drugged, maybe even brainwashed. I spend far less time with Jim Penniston, but he too strikes me as a likable, honest person. But as of this moment, I can't honestly sit here and tell you that I believe he received a binary code message from time travelers.
Yes, he seems to be a personable person, but you can never get inside somebody's head.
I believe he believes he encountered something strange in the woods back in 1980. But perhaps his mind was tampered with too.
The way the human brain works is quite complicated, and confabulation can be all over the place. People can be outright lying in confabulation, or they can be telling what they really think is the truth, but has nothing to do with reality. The question here is what really happened, not what they think happened. And what they're saying now certainly does not match their reports at the time.
I'm not ready to call Rendlesham Britain's Roswell just yet, but something strange happened in the woods back in December of 1980. Something that affected a number of U.S. Air Force men in a profound and negative way. And that is worthy of further investigation, UFOs or not. And now, I'd like to know what you think. You can contact us here at The Conspiracy Show through our website, www.theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid. Move over, Aphrodite. I'm coming home. Good night. Hi, welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. Crop circles are elaborate designs consisting of several interconnecting geometric shapes, usually found in farmers' fields where the crop has been flattened. Some people believe crop circles are communications from extraterrestrials. Others believe they're produced by some unknown natural energy that creates these complex ground patterns. But in the early 90s, 2 self-professed hoaxsters from England came forward and claimed they'd been making crop circles with simple hand tools since 1978. So, what's the truth? Tonight, we'll meet several circle chasers who affirm that the scientific data proves, if nothing else, these enigmatic complex patterns remain one of the most awesome and tangible mysteries of our time. We'll also meet a member of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry who insists that these investigators' claims are hypothetical pseudoscience. Me? I just want the truth, and I'm willing to follow it wherever it may lead. It is time to redefine reality. Genetic enigma or a human-alien hybrid? That's how cynical I am now about the process. Is it possible technology can alter weather patterns created by the that has been engineered by the Illuminati?
There's no doubt.
I'm here just outside Philadelphia with filmmaker, crop circle researcher Jennifer Stein. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome to The Conspiracy Show.
Thank you so much.
How would you describe a crop circle to someone who's never seen one?
Oh, gosh. An amazing experience, an impression in the crop where the wheat is laid down almost as if it's steamed into place in an amazing geometric pattern. And you can really only understand it and see its geometry from the air. They're usually huge and highly complex. And it's a phenomenon that, people are interested in UFOs and other phenomenon, ghosts and things like that. But a crop circle is a tangible thing. It exists, it's on the ground, it's a phenomenon you can walk into, you can research, you can dig up the soil, you can look at the crops, look at the plants under a microscope. So it's a more researchable phenomenon as well.
If you're very, very lucky and you're able to get to a brand new crop circle, the plants are bent about an inch above the soil to the point where the seed heads are just levitating above the soil. They use nature's own mathematical ratio, which is the golden ratio. So it has a very unique shape, almost like the kind of shape you find on a shell on the beach. And the other beautiful thing about the genuine phenomenon is that the plants appear to have been laid as if they were laid in a display case in a museum. Everything is meticulously arranged without any damage, usually with a slight undulation to it, like a sine wave in music. So it's almost like walking on poetry.
Some of them are extremely large. The football field size area of geometrically flattened crop is not unusual.
Was there a particular crop formation that you were particularly intrigued with?
Well, the triple Julia set was, of the mid-90s, was so amazing. It just, they just blow you away. They're so beautiful, they're so intricate, and they're so obviously transcendental that you just become totally bedazzled. So there was definitely a handful of them beyond any ability to put into words how you would feel about how wonderful they were. They just took your breath away.
How far back do sightings or accounts of crop circles go?
We have events that were witnessed by police in Britain in the 1920s. We have events that were witnessed by postal workers, agrarians, military personnel in 1890. And we even have a report that goes back to 1670 in the Natural History of Staffordshire in England. And back then they were talking about witches' circles and devil's rings. But they actually meticulously recorded the same details and evidence that we found in the crop circles in the modern era.
Justin Trottier is the executive director for the Center for Inquiry. Justin, welcome to The Conspiracy Show.
It's nice to be back on, thank you.
The two famous self-professed hoaxsters that came forward in England in the early 90s, Doug and Dave, claimed that they were making crop circles with simple homemade tools.
I think when you mention Doug and Dave, that's really important, is to realize that even at the beginning of the whole phenomenon, the two individuals that sparked the whole craze, they came out and admitted it was a hoax. And many others who have fooled the populace, who have fooled farmers, who have fooled even the media and gotten a lot of attention, frankly money out of that fame, have come forward and admitted that it was a hoax.
You don't believe that Doug and Dave are responsible for most of these crop circles?
Absolutely not. I'm sure they did 5, 10, 10 of them, but if you look at a Doug and Dave circle or any of the other hoaxers that put up their hands and said, hey, we're hoaxers, which there was quite a few after them, the crop circles are impressive from a distance, but not when you get up close and have a good look.
Doug and Dave cannot create changes in standing crop. You know, when Doug and Dave flatten a crop with a board, you can see the markers. You can dig up the soil and you can see that there's no soil changes in the formations that they have made.
We're also seeing skeptical inquirers, so to speak, like Joe Nickel, for example, who've actually gone out and produced crop designs that have looked just like the ones that are supposedly the real deal, created by these freak phenomena or alien visitations or what have you.
So if you were to go out into a field, and believe it or not, grown men do go into a field with planks of wood and garden rollers. I kid you not. And the moment you actually do that to plants, you're going to crease them at the very base. And that's the defining thing between genuine and man-made.
The ones that are hoaxed tend to have bruise marks. The laid crop has bruise marks on it, or it's squished, or it's torn. There's crop torn out of the ground. There's just damage that isn't immediately obvious, but any researcher that has any experience and takes the time can find it fairly quickly.
You get the sense from the media that this is a whole joke perpetuated by two drunken guys that came out of a pub one evening. The thing is, they were regurgitating information that had been published at the time. What they didn't know is that most of the research had never been published, and it showed that the phenomenon is much older than we care to believe.
You've stated that British intelligence, MI5, attempted to quell public interest in crop circles at one point. What was their motive?
I think they're just like us. They want to know what's behind it. Certainly the question was raised in Parliament. Certainly a lot of money for the taxpayer was used to keep the crop circles under surveillance, even after the whole Doug and Dave debacle came out, which we now know and can prove came from a fictitious press agency that was created by the British Ministry of Defence.
There's enough evidence going back 20 or 25 years to suggest that certain press agencies, fake press agencies, were set up to distribute stories. You know, the usual planted stories, the same as in the UFO tradition.
It was created by a media company in Britain, and then that media company folded and doesn't exist anymore. So whoever created the Doug and Dave story, I think, had a deliberate intent to take media off the track of seriously looking at the crop circle phenomenon.
The whole Doug and Dave situation was created by the government, or a branch of the government, to basically keep the level of excitement in the population about the crop circles down as much as possible, to give the government as much time as possible to research it on their own terms, not dissimilar to the way that UFO researched as well.
If there's any correlation between the UFO phenomenon and the crop circle phenomenon, I would imagine that the same bait and switch type of propaganda is being exploited in this way. Since the government cannot hide them, they're out there, they can't control what's ever happening in the crop circles, the best way to control it in plain sight is to debunk it.
Intelligence agencies react with fear rather than with wonder, like as the rest of us do.
We know that so-called experts can't tell the difference. To me, it seems obvious that even those few in which we don't know the reality, hoax, or potentially something else, it makes more sense that they are caused by humans rather than aliens that have come a great distance just to make some really interesting images and then have flown away without a trace.
Are the designs of these crop swirls changing, evolving over time?
Oh, very much so. They began as simple circles with rings. And after the development of straight lines, then we began to get pictograms. And after that, by the time we get to the mid-1990s, now we're seeing fractal patterns.
There's an aspect of fractal mathematics which is often played out or described in the fields.
As the years went by, they got much, much more complicated. And the biggest, I believe, is 1.6 acres of flattened crop.
If they just got into the middle of a field and etched on it, "I am from Mars," we just laugh at it. But by making these symbols mysterious, mathematical, geometrical, and of course our cells are geometrical, we respond to that geometry, and we like a good mystery, so we're going to inquire about it. But eventually they'll leave it up to us to find out and argue over, which of course we do.
Talk to me some more about the physical characteristics of the plants inside the crop circle and how they differ from their neighbors outside the crop circle.
The plants appear to have been bent by a non-mechanical force. which leaves no physical impact on the plants themselves. So you have to actually allow for the idea that something that is non-physical is coming into contact with it. That's the main feature. So I figured, is there another answer to this? Is there something else along the frequency spectrum that could create these effects? And when I began to look at sound, both above and below the human hearing range, I was able to find the same series of effects that can be caused on natural substances like plants. If you ally infrasound with 5 atmospheres of pressure, you are able to send a very low frequency through a tube filled with water, which is essentially what a plant is. And you can boil the water in that plant in 1 nanosecond, and it's been proved at Princeton University. And that's what we find in the genuine circles. Even all the way back into 1680, when the director of the Ashmoleans said, when you break these plants apart and you smell them, they smell as if they've been baked on the inside. And that's what we find now.
The cell walls of the nodes of the plant, the nodes are like your knuckles on your finger, the cell walls are expanded as if by, Dr. Levengood thinks, microwave energy.
There are very specific and unique changes that happen in formations that seem to be made by some plasma or electromagnetic energy that hits the fields that changes the components of these types of characteristics. You see expulsion cavities and blown nodes where steam expels out the side because it heats up and it needs to escape somewhere. You find micron iron-sized balls in the soil, and you can drag a magnet across the soil and the soil will stick to the magnet. You don't find this in Doug and Dave formations.
Well, I looked into some of these reports, and I'm not sure how comprehensive they are. I feel like until we actually have good, solid science and replication of these kinds of tests, it's hard to actually conclude that there's anything to them.
Freddie, take me inside a crop circle. Give me the whole 5 senses. What am I going to see, smell, hear, feel?
Oh, there are many levels of experience with a crop circle, and I had no idea until I got directly involved in this. I'd only heard information third hand. Only when you actually experience one for yourself will you realize that you're having a religious experience. And I used to be an atheist before I got involved in this phenomenon, and now I know differently.
Maybe it's like an energy vortex you step into. I don't know for sure, but personally, I have had the most amazing precognitive, synchronistic events that have occurred. So I think there's some connection there with time and space that we don't yet understand that gets a little distorted or speeded up with crop circle research. And that's another deep personal experience.
Right, or the experience, they say that they've experienced a sense of feeling ill or ill at ease or something like that. I mean, these are subjective experiences. Individuals that know that they're in a space that's supposedly holy or supposedly paranormal will often have those reports. It's a standard kind of placebo effect explanation, which I think is readily apparent in those kinds of cases.
It always seems to inspire people in a spiritual manner to any number of activities, which may just be, meditation, contemplation of the unseen realities that surround us. I don't see any, even the hoaxers, who are, some of them are quite egotistical, when you talk to them, they're quite inspired. They love doing what they're doing, and they'll say, oh, well, I hoaxed that one. But they take great pride in their hoaxing,
Who or what do you think is or might be responsible for these formations?
Wow. That is the million-dollar question. And boy, if I knew that, I'd certainly be sharing that with the world. After many years of research, I have come to suspect certain things, but I can't prove it.
It's a part of history now, but Dr. Terence Meaden in the early 90s, when the crop circles were essentially simple circles or simple rings, he developed some theories about scientifically explainable ways that they might be caused by weather, by updrafts of wind, or small roaming tornadoes, or whatever he called them at the time. And he was quite strong on that and sounded very convincing when he spoke of it.
Well, I think the crop circles that are less obviously designed, that are simply roughly circular in appearance, that those may have been caused by things that are natural, like weather phenomena, just taking out a roughly circular patch of crop.
But it only worked when they were simple. When they got complex, which was as early as 91, with squares and rectangles and little things shooting off, and the theory fell apart.
Ultimately, is this a mystery that can and will be solved? I mean, are these clues that are being left for us leading us somewhere?
I think they are, and I think that the fact that people have already been used to figure out technological blueprints, which are helping us to understand lighter than gravity technology, is one clue. I think that the 800 people who've actually experienced some form of healing in crop circles, or by looking at the pictures of crop circles, suggests that there's some energy at work which is of great benefit to society.
You can't deny that there appears to be a message. Maybe someone who has access to this type of technology is messing around with us. Possibly it's an alien intelligence speaking to us.
But they are a group consciousness that keeps popping up in Earth's history, usually associated with periods of temple building around the world. And they go by different names in different parts of the world. In the Christian mythology, they call them guardian angels. In Egypt, they call them the Watchers. And I know it's a long stretch to go that far. It's quite possible that someone on another level of reality is trying to interact with us in a very intimate way to get us to move along.
So maybe there are things we don't understand yet about the dimensional relationship of our world.
To me, it just suggests strongly that these are made carefully, planned and executed ahead of time with a lot of thought to communicate certain ideas to us from the non-visible world. We are being communicated with, no question.
This one, I think, is closer to the case closed than some of the other paranormal issues that I've explored. I do think this one has a lot of evidence, overwhelming evidence, of the vast majority, perhaps all of the cases of crop circles being caused by human ingenuity. So to me, it's human ingenuity that's worth exploring. I'm amazed, again, by how elaborate the projects are that the human mind can put itself towards. And I think that's worth continuing to investigate.
There's no doubt that some crop circles are probably fraudulent, but I have a hard time believing that these immense, intricate designs, some of them resembling mathematical fractals, could be made by human hands. The plants found within crop circles have dramatically different physical characteristics than their neighbors outside the crop circle. The plant stems are of increased size, as if subjected to intense heat. The seeds taken from within the crop circle are noticeably smaller, and yet the crop yield inside the crop circles is 30 to 40% higher in one instance. Researchers and other observers who enter into a crop circle have reported feeling ill and hearing an odd trilling sound. To date, no man-made crop swirl has been able to duplicate any of these strange phenomena. Are these alien signposts? Are they manifestations of some mysterious energy force? Whatever they are, they remain at odds with modern science and one of the most baffling mysteries of our time. And now, I'd like to know what you think. You can contact us here at The Conspiracy Show through our website, www.theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid. Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. People from around the world, all races, creeds, religions, from across all socioeconomic backgrounds are reporting being taken aboard some sort of spacecraft against their will. They're unable to move or speak or resist. In some cases, they report being subjected to horrific experimentation by strange-looking beings with long limbs, black almond-shaped eyes. These creatures seem indifferent to their suffering of their captives. Victims then report returning to the location from which they were taken and left emotionally shaken, sometimes permanently scarred physically and psychologically. Sometimes they have no recollection of the traumatic event and only discover years later, under hypnosis, what happened. On this episode of The Conspiracy Show, we investigate the alien abduction phenomenon. We're about to meet the man at the center of one of the most famous abduction cases in history. His story would be turned into a Hollywood motion picture. We'll also meet another alleged victim of abduction who claims multiple abductions when he was a child. And we'll meet an abduction researcher who has worked with thousands of alleged abductees under hypnosis. Of course, we'll also speak to a skeptic who believes the phenomenon has a perfectly rational scientific explanation. Me? Well, I just want the truth, and I'm willing to follow it wherever it may lead. It is time to redefine reality. Genetic enigma or a human alien hybrid? That's how cynical I am now about the process. Extreme technology can alter weather patterns created by the has been engineered by the Illuminati. There's no doubt. I'm here in Arizona with Travis Walton, who was at the center of what is considered to be one of the most credible alien abduction cases. He is the author of Fire in the Sky, The Walton Experience. Travis, welcome to The Conspiracy Show.
Good to be with you.
Take us back to November 5th, 1975. What were you doing at that time, and what happened on that day?
Well, I was working in the woods with a crew of 6 other men. We just finished a hard day's work, and it was starting to get dark. And we loaded up our equipment and headed out. And we hadn't gone very far when we noticed a strange light coming through the trees. And when we finally got where we could see the source of the light, we saw this metallic disc hovering there, outlined against the sky. It was just unmistakable. It was less than 100 feet away. And I got out and went up to get a closer look.
What compelled you, Travis, to get out of the truck and actually approach this strange light?
Well, some of the other crew guys still think that it looked to them like I was in some kind of a trance, like I was being drawn towards it. But I didn't feel like I was under any outside control at all. To me, I was just curious to see it up close. It was really awesome to behold. It was glowing. The whole area was lit up with a very strange sort of a light that changed the color of everything. And the object itself was, part of it was metallic and part of it was glowing, but the whole thing was one smooth surface, like it was made out of glass or something. The closer I got, the scareder I got, and they were getting pretty anxious, and they were, yelling at me to get away from there. And when I got right up to it and was looking up at it, it suddenly got louder and started to move. And as soon as I raised up, I just felt this electric shock go through my body, like I'd been hit and didn't see it coming. And the next thing I knew, I was waking up, and at first I thought I was in a hospital, but when I finally got where I could focus my eyes, I saw that these weren't medical personnel around me, that there was these creatures standing over me. And I just flipped out. I just really became sort of crazy with fear. And I was thinking of fighting my way past them and getting out of there, but they suddenly left the room. And so I went looking for a way out.
I'm here near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania with Dr. David Jacobs, alien abduction researcher. David, welcome to The Conspiracy Show.
Thank you, Richard, for having me.
Have you been able to put together, say, a list of commonalities that sort of underlie all of these abduction cases?
Most abductions have a certain commonalities. If there were no commonalities, I would not be an abduction researcher. People say that they're taken out of their normal environment. which might be their bed, which might be their car, which might be their kitchen or their living room or whatever it is, but it won't be their workplace usually. And they're usually abducted when they're going to be missed the least, and that's usually when they're alone. They're brought on board a UFO, either they're floated up usually into this object. They are passive, their jaws are slack, their eyes are glassy. They can't run, they can't swing and hit somebody or anything like that, they can't resist. It is somewhere between 12 and 15 million potential abductees. It's absolutely crazy.
Well, in the Walton case, if it looks like a hoax, has the characteristics of a hoax, and is crying out, hoax, hoax, maybe it's a hoax. Walton is seeing the classic type of UFO that's evolved, the sort of saucer-shaped. And besides, there's, I think it was a $5,000 offer from National Enquirer for the best UFO tale or something. And so, hey, this could have sounded very good to some good old boys.
What do you make of the Travis Walton abduction case?
Well, I think that the Travis Walton abduction case is a very, very good case. Travis Walton is a very intelligent, very thoughtful, very well-spoken person. I like that case. In the beginning, I thought it was a hoax, but not now.
So November 10th, 1975, you suddenly reappear. Take me back to that day.
Well, I looked around and I found myself, standing in the middle of the dark, but I could see the lights of Heber down below. That's the town nearest where this happened. So I ran down in there, found a phone booth, and called my brother-in-law, but he thought it was another practical joke, a prank call. Apparently the family had been receiving a lot of them. In the first few minutes of conversation, it came out that they, I was thinking it was still the same night. I didn't know that 5 days had gone by. And my brother said, feel your face. And I had this 5-day growth of beard, and I looked at my watch, and the date had changed, and so that was quite a shock.
All the evidence, if you look at the pieces of the evidence, nothing about what he says or what he did really is very convincing. First of all, he had told his mother, if you ever hear of me being abducted by aliens, don't worry about it. He was missing for about 5 days, and the local police thought it was a hoax, and they thought his mother knew something about it because she was not that upset when she heard that Travis had been abducted by aliens.
The law enforcement authorities immediately suspected that the rest of the Woods crew were making up a cover story, that they'd probably murdered me and hidden the body and were trying to explain why nobody was going to see me again. The men volunteered to take the lie detector test, and the sheriff set up polygraph. When the men passed, they had to come up with another theory.
We were told there were a couple of polygraph exams that Walton had passed, but then we find out later that there had been an earlier one we hadn't heard about, and he failed that one so badly that the polygraph examiner said he was not only failed the test, he was practicing deceptive tactics, like trying to hold or alter his breathing.
It was just one thing after another, trying to explain it away, trying to say that it was alcohol or drug hallucination or a transitory psychosis, but there's been a lot of medical testing that disproves that there was any drugs involved. I took psychological exams that proved there was no mental abnormalities at all. People just didn't want to accept it, and anybody that, from a skeptical point of view, that had some theory, however unsupported, kind of got some attention in the media back then.
I believe Walton was tested for about the 4th time, something like that, in 2009, and failed again for a TV show. Well, I don't want to make too much of that, but for those who say, oh, he passed the polygraph, I'm saying, well, not all the time.
There was a lie detector test given to him very early on through the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization that he did not do well on. Then I don't know how many lie detector tests he's taken since then that he's passed. But the point is that there were like 5 other witnesses, I guess, and they all saw a UFO strike him with a light. They all passed lie detector tests. There was one guy who was brand new, who didn't really know them all that much, and the other ones, they had squabbles between each other, but they all maintained the that they were the truthfulness of what they had seen.
Paul Shishis is an alien abductee. Paul, welcome to The Conspiracy Show.
Thank you for having me here today, Richard.
When did it all start?
Oh, well, I had childhood nightmares at age 4 to 6, which I believe were dreams. I found out at age 44 from a newspaper article confirmed there were UFOs over Scarborough at that time. It sort of connected me to why I was seeing all these UFOs throughout my life.
It begins in infancy, and we know that because parents are abducted with their babies sometimes. And it continues into old age, and it happens with great frequency.
How often did this happen to you?
They seem to happen almost, to me as a child, almost nightly.
And they search all their lives for a whole series of events that they might have strange reactions to over the course of time since they were children.
Tell me about these encounters, these contacts that you thought were dreams. What did you see?
I remember being in the arms of a tall, white, gray-type creature. The head was very large. The eyes were very large with black eyes. And I could only move my eyes and I could not scream.
You get this sense of being paralyzed. It's actually called sleep paralysis because the body is still asleep. It's out of sync. And yet you're in this dreamlike state. And we can trace this phenomenon back to the Middle Ages when people believed in demons and they woke to see an incubus or a succubus pressing down on their body, holding them down, hence the paralysis. They're hallucinating an explanation for what's happening to their body.
What would you say to a skeptic who might suggest that what you were experiencing as a child was a phenomenon known as sleep paralysis?
Well, does sleep paralysis generate sound? Because I do remember hearing sound of my parents snoring. The light I described earlier, I do remember hearing a sound when it was moving closer to me. So there was sound associated. And of course, you know, how will you ever prove that this really happened because of so many years? And as I say, to actually find out that Scarborough had sightings back in 1965 that I discovered from the Star Archives, a Toronto newspaper, that this confirmed to me there was in fact something going on. In memory of my class in grade 1, certain kids, my friends, had bleeding noses a lot. So there may have been a program going on in my neighborhood, period.
Other abductions of other children?
Yes.
These are sane and normal people. This is not a mental disorder. They're not psychotic. They're sane and normal. But they're different. They're within, they're over at one end of the spectrum of highly imaginative, quite able to imagine things, and they often have very vivid dreams. They're easily hypnotized. This is a very important point, even self-hypnotizable.
A person who knows what they're doing using hypnosis can put into place a series of protocols which will prevent having everything taken at face value, whether it's remembered consciously or not.
The main thing that was accomplished by the hypnosis was to calm me down and separate the fear from the memories.
In 1986, I began to do my own hypnotic regressions. Hypnosis is just relaxation and focusing in. And the first thing you do, of course, is if you've never heard testimony before, if something sounds like just very, very strange, you put it on the back burner, you wait for other people to say the same thing, and the more people you have saying the same thing, the stronger the evidence becomes.
Most of the cases are not hoaxes. There are exceptions, of course. Most of the people appear to be what are called fantasy-prone individuals. Now, to go through the looking glass and take up the position with Travis Walton, we have lots of evidence, but none of it's very good. It's all anecdotes and dreams and psychological states, and the Travis Walton case, which is, I think, too good to be true. So you have to buy into that. Then you have to believe that the aliens had some reason to pick out Travis and to keep him for some time, and that the aliens look just like we've imagined them to look. and their craft look just like we've imagined them to look. These all can be shown to be sort of evolved things that show up now in our comic books. So any way we look at it, the Travis Walton case, I think, cannot be distinguished from a hoax.
What do you think they want, whoever they are?
I believe they're interested in certain genetic genes that we carry. I believe that we could be, all of us, the human race right now, could be under one big hybrid program. In my analysis of today of what I've researched, this seems to might be the case of changing the species as maybe what had happened with Neanderthals.
You know, I've done so many interviews about this, and it's kind of curious that in interview after interview, they leave out the fact that there was these other types of beings in there. I took them to be human rescuers at first.
I hope it's positive. I hope it's wonderful. I hope they're here to cure cancer and stop war. I hope they're here to bring us into the community of planets and and I want to be an ambassador and all that sort of stuff. I hope that's true. That would be wonderful. That's not what people tell me. Years ago, I began to hear accounts that were of people being taken into rooms and looking at items on a screen. Normal scenes of everyday human life. They're standing there with an alien or a hybrid, and they hear in their minds, because all communication is telepathic on board these objects. Can you tell the difference between you and us? What do you mean, difference? Everybody looks the same to me. They'll hear, isn't that wonderful? Isn't that great? Soon we will all be happy. Soon everybody will know his place. Now, the first time I heard that, you just dismiss it. Maybe it's confabulation, whatever it is. But then I began to hear it again and again and again and again. People would say, aliens say to them, soon we'll all be together. People would see these images of different things, so they were supposed to pick out the hybrids, basically, from the humans. And I began to realize, as this evidence began to pile up, that soon we would all be together, just like they were saying.
Look at the whole setting of it. I mean, let's just look at the Walton case, just step back a little bit from belief or disbelief and just objectively look at it. What do we have? We have Travis Walton, who has record for having burgled and forged stolen checks. And so we have a guy who, I'm not saying he's all bad or he can't tell the truth, but that's what we're starting with. And he shows up with this case, this alien encounter, just 2 weeks after the made-for-TV movie featuring the Betty and Barney Hill case in 1975 with James Earl Jones and Estella Parsons.
The Travis Walton case became the subject of the 1993 film Fire in the Sky. It is often described by researchers as the best documented case of alien abduction ever recorded. But in the absence of any concrete evidence and contradictory lie detector test results, I remain unconvinced the Walton case was a genuine alien abduction. Our other alleged abductee seems very sincere, but again, a total absence of concrete evidence makes it most impossible to evaluate this case. However, I don't believe that every case can be explained away as a hoax, the overactive imagination of fantasy-prone individuals, or a condition known as sleep paralysis. In 1991, David Jacobs, along with the late Bud Hopkins, and sociologist Dr. Ron Westrom, commissioned a Roper poll in order to determine how many Americans might have experienced the abduction phenomenon. Of nearly 6,000 Americans polled, 119 answered in a way that Hopkins, Jacobs, and Westrom interpreted as supporting their ET interpretation of the abduction phenomenon. Based on this figure, they estimated that nearly 4 million Americans may have been abducted by extraterrestrials. If we were to extrapolate that data, the worldwide figure would be nearly 100 million possible alien abductees. Let's suppose that only 0.1% of those respondents actually experienced something that could be not otherwise explained away as fantasy, or some underlying psychological or neurological condition. That would be 10,000 cases in America alone. Something is going on. The answer could be extraterrestrial. It could be demonic. It could be some sort of psychological warfare experiment where victims are drugged or hypnotized and implanted with false memories. Regardless, something real is behind the alien abduction phenomenon, and I pray it doesn't happen to you. And now, I'd like to know what you think. You can contact me here at The Conspiracy Show through our website, www.theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid. Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. At approximately 4:40 p.m. on Tuesday, November 7th, 2006, federal authorities at Chicago O'Hare International Airport received a report that a group of 12 airport employees were witnessing a metallic, saucer-shaped craft hovering over gate C-17. According to eyewitness reports, the strange object was first spotted by a ramp employee who was pushing back United Airlines Flight 446, which was departing Chicago for Charlotte, North Carolina. The ramp worker then apprised the flight crew of United Airlines 446 of the existence of the spinning metallic object above their aircraft, and it is believed that both the pilot and co-pilot of this aircraft also witnessed the object at the same time. Several independent witnesses outside of the airport also witnessed the object. One of these witnesses describes a blatant disc-shaped craft hovering over the airport, which was obviously not clouds. According to this witness, several nearby observers gasped as the object shot through the clouds at high velocity, leaving a clear blue hole in the cloud layer. On this episode of The Conspiracy Show, we'll examine the Chicago O'Hare UFO incident. I sat down and discussed the O'Hare UFO incident with a newspaper reporter with the Chicago Tribune and a couple of UFO researchers who maintain the buzz over the O'Hare sighting is fully justified because of the quality of the witnesses and the documents that were generated. And as usual, I also sat down and listened to a skeptic who maintains the UFO incident can simply be described as a strange weather phenomenon. Me, I just want the truth, and I'm willing to follow it wherever it leads. It is time to redefine reality. What happened over Chicago's O'Hare Airport on November 7th, 2006?
We really have one of the iconic UFO encounters in modern history. And this is at Chicago's O'Hare Airport, one of the largest and busiest airports in the world. Roughly 15 people or so, at the least, witnessed this thing in the sky. Now, there was a cloud cover that day, approximately 10,000 feet clouds. Below that cloud was an object. It was there for possibly 10 minutes, possibly a little longer. It shot off so rapidly, so powerfully, that according to the witnesses, it punched a hole through the clouds.
And it shouldn't be there. This is Class B airspace. And at Concourse C, gate C-17, there was a jet sitting there getting ready to take off, and I believe it was 446 was the number. And some people working at the ramp looked up. They were, for some reason, drawn to the sky, and they noticed that there was this object below the cloud cover. The cloud cover that day was about 1,900 feet, and this appeared to be somewhere around 400 some feet below the cloud cover. It caught their attention. This object shouldn't be there. It was rotating in a counterclockwise, yet it appeared to mask itself or be pretty similar in coloration as the cloud cover itself, but yet it was discernible as being something different. This individual contacted both the pilot and co-pilot, then contacted the manager, his manager. Manager came down, looked at it, contacted the tower. Before you knew it, a whole series of conversations were going on over the radio.
The United witnesses all spoke to the senior management about the encounter, and they were told in no uncertain terms that they were not supposed to talk about this at all. One person reported that sighting to the National UFO Reporting Center, which is on the web, and described it there. There, the story sat for a couple of months until the Chicago Tribune journalist, John Hilkovich, got wind of it. And John Hilkovich's beat was transportation.
Well, if this had happened, I guess, anywhere else in the Chicago area, I would not have had an interest. This happened on one of my beats, O'Hare International Airport. And as I got underway in reporting, the fact that the quality of these witnesses was so high. I mean, these were pilots, these were mechanics that were taxiing aircraft, ramp attendants, individuals who are very familiar with the airport environment and really have eagle eyes and are able to spot, just ordinary aircraft from miles away and even tell you what type they are when it looks to the average person as a pin in the sky. So the fact that these were very credible witnesses and that they were all telling the same story about this gray disc-shaped object above gate C-17 at O'Hare, and just its size, its altitude, whether or not it was spinning, and then after a few minutes, how it abruptly just exited the airspace by piercing this donut-shaped hole in an overcast sky. Was very unusual. I mean, an airplane with its wings doesn't make this kind of signature.
Makes this a stronger than average case in terms of witness testimony. When an airline pilot is unable to identify an aerial object, you have to assume that matters. I mean, these are the guys who their job is to know everything that's supposed to be in the air because they encounter it. They need to know what's out there.
All totaled, how many witnesses at O'Hare did you speak to?
Well over a dozen witnesses, and then after the story appeared, there were more people who came forward, who were passengers in the terminal or people in nearby suburbs ringing O'Hare, who also saw something and described it in a similar fashion.
If it wasn't for the involvement, of course, of John Hilkovich pursuing it further, threading a FOIA, I think to this day they would say nothing transpired at all. The initial witness, and not just him, but everybody else, met, of course, some sort of ardent resistance. This was UAL. They knew this was a concern from a safety point of view, and this is really all this gentleman was doing, and everybody else was bringing up the fact that this is a blatant violation of security. This was a security concern, if more than anything. Here are this objects there that shouldn't be there. It's obviously something very unusual. High-level management want to basically put it under the rug as fast as they can.
John Hilkovich's piece on the O'Hare UFO incident ran in January 2007 under the headline, "In the Sky." A bird, a plane, a UFO? It attracted more than 1.6 million page views on the online edition, the most in the history of ChicagoTribune.com.
But the whole thing exploded. When the Tribune article came out with John Hilkovich, it got more hits on their website than any other story they had ever had. United Airlines was forced then to admit that, yes, indeed, they had looked into it. And they had to admit that they had been lying and all of it.
So I went on to do Freedom of Information Act requests. We got logs from O'Hare Tower showing that there were various reports radioed in from different parts of the airfield, and also FAA tapes, where we actually have the discourse between air traffic controllers in O'Hare Tower and pilots and planes. Did you see this? Yeah, I saw it, but it's gone now. Stuff like that. So clearly there was, for whatever reason, some kind of denial, or you could say cover-up.
At that point, the story begins to break, and FAA also made one denial after another. We discovered through investigation that these are both bold-faced lies. United was very much involved in trying to understand what this was, as was the FAA. Or at the very least, they were involved in trying to clamp down on the information reaching the general public. They just did not want this coming out.
Well, if any of the United Airlines personnel were, shall we say, discouraged from discussing it, I think it's the same as with the bureaucracies anywhere, government or business bureaucracies. It's avoid bad publicity at all times, at all cost. If you're part of the federal bureaucracy like the FAA and somebody reports seeing a UFO and you don't know what they saw and you don't know what they're reporting, you don't want some reporter coming to you and saying, tell me about this, and you're going to have to say that you don't know what it is. That's bad publicity. Much better to say, I didn't see it, there was nothing reported. Just deny it.
Well, it's entirely possible. United was going through real financial trouble, bankruptcy proceedings. And
I don't know if it was the bankruptcy per se or just an overall feeling among management that you don't want to be known as the UFO airline. They did put the hammer down on their employees who were talking to me. A photographed one was going to photograph others. They were willing to give their names and be interviewed with full disclosure. And both the airline and in the case of Airline Pilots Association, ALPA, the pilots union, they both told their members not to talk. So, you know, I was at the point in my reporting where I had their names, I had pictures, and, you know, clearly I told them early on, you're on the record, and they agreed to that. But then after they got all this pressure with threats of, you know, punishment and possible termination, I decided I could still tell the story. I could, you know, prove to my editors that we had real people here, real credible people here, and we were able to tell the story without jeopardizing anybody's jobs.
They were stating it was a lenticular cloud underneath the overcast that we had that day, which was a serious overcast. It was getting darker out, but the lighting would have been diffused, of course, by the natural light, which was enough at that period of time. So both explanations were foolish.
I think the most likely explanation is that there was what's called a hole punch cloud. It's basically when ice crystals fall on clouds a certain way and it makes a circular hole in it. Now, some of the UFO proponents have said that isn't possible because at the ceiling was low and the temperature of the ceiling, at the level of the ceiling, was above freezing, and therefore this ice crystals couldn't form, and so therefore this wasn't possible. That would be true. However, if there was a second, usually such things occur at a much higher elevation than just 5,000 or 10,000 feet, whatever the lower level was. A break, however, in the clouds at the lower ceiling would reveal whatever was above, and if above was a higher level cloud with hole punch occurring, people would have seen it for a short time, and then when the ceiling closed together again, then it would appear to have gone away. What's very interesting is if you look at the website of NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, that has been set up for a hole punch cloud to explain what this thing is, they will show you a photo they took in Wisconsin, and it turns out it was actually something like 2 to 3 weeks just after this. In other words, it's the same region of the country, the same general time of year, and they had a really nice hole punch cloud on their website there. It was the same year, within a few weeks of the O'Hare incident. So I really think that's likely what it is.
Now, here's what I say about that. The only reason they call it a weather phenomenon is because they absolutely, positively must not ever admit that it was a craft of some sort, which is what everyone said it was. All of the witnesses said it was an object, a craft, not natural phenomenon. Every single one of the witnesses, every one. Now, if your policy or your philosophy is to deny absolutely that there are UFOs, what are you left with but weather phenomena? You have nothing else. You have to grasp at those straws, and that's all that they've done.
Flight crews are not necessarily trained to recognize and identify weather phenomena. In fact, I believe it was one of the servers who, reported seeing this. It was not pilots, I don't think. Nothing turned up on radar. I would think that if there were any object hovering over O'Hare Field, especially at a low altitude, not only would it be seen by far more people all over the region, not just a few scattered people who report. In fact, I believe they were mostly all in this one gate. Wow, it should have been seen much more widely, and it should have turned up on radar. So the fact that it didn't suggests it really wasn't a solid object. It was just something that looked a little bizarre. And I having seen these hole punch clouds, they can look very bizarre.
Radar reports and the actual radar data, which you have to get in the United States in a period of 15 days. Anomalies we're seeing, I believe there were some indications that something was there during that period of time. The other thing is the short period of time and the fact that it was stationary, not moving, makes it very difficult for it to be recorded. If it was moving, it would be recorded.
But their line all the way has been that this was some kind of a weather phenomenon, that this was some kind of light show at O'Hare that played tricks on the eyes of all these people. But these witnesses were people that have worked there for years under all sorts of weather conditions and such. So with that kind of veracity and ability to identify things, they were clear this was not runway lights bouncing off the pavement onto the sky. This was, to them, a real object of some sort, and it merited investigation both from a security and safety standpoint. FAA's longstanding policy is that if any individuals report what they consider a UFO, is that they should dial 911, call local law enforcement, or call the National UFO Reporting Center. But the FAA itself really washes its hands of this issue completely.
Well, one thing skeptics are entirely right in asking for is physical evidence of this case, at least, if nothing else, a bona fide photograph. And it is said that at least one and possibly several photographs were taken. At least what I had read was that the pilot of the aircraft had a camera and took at least one picture of the sun.
Many photographs were taken. I don't know if these individuals were intimidated, if they gave that voluntarily.
Now, it could be some kind of black budget, clandestine prototype technology, I suppose. Although you might wonder, why would this be employed over O'Hare Airport?
If they are, and they're just not brought to light, I'm not really sure. The mannerism, the way they did this, and the way they made people feel foolish for coming forward is not proper conduct.
You know, whether it was a drone or some other kind of scientific or military, aircraft, we'll never know. The witnesses I dealt with, as I said, were highly credible. I don't think it was a light show. I don't think they were tricked by anything. We don't have any photos. We don't have any radar. This thing was there for maybe 4 minutes. If it was there, it appeared to suddenly depart, and never came back. So all the planets and life forms that have to be out there in the age of the universe, personally, I believe there's other forms of life. Whether they visited O'Hare on November 6th, 2006, I don't know. But we're certainly, we had no intention of ignoring that story once the various factors came to light.
They saw an extraordinary object, an extraordinary craft take off from motionlessness to instant acceleration. Isn't anyone in the least bit curious as to what type of object can do that? What is its source of energy? What are the implications that might have for our own society, our own energy paradigm in our world today? And then another question might be to ask, why is there so much obfuscation and cover-up and denial about this? I think those are a few issues right off the top of my head as to why the O'Hare UFO incident still matters to this day.
The official party line on the Chicago O'Hare UFO incident was this was simply a weather phenomenon. It was an overcast day, and that combined with the twilight and various lights at the airport could potentially create an optical illusion or two. I've seen pictures and videos of hole punch clouds. Believe me, they're remarkable things to behold. We've posted some pictures of them on the website. I can see how one could mistake a punch hole cloud for a UFO, but a pilot? That's a little harder to swallow. And if it was just a punch hole cloud, why did the FAA deny there were any reports, but they were then forced to change their story after that reporter with the Chicago Trib filed a Freedom of Information request? If it was just a punch hole cloud, why did United Airlines order its employees not to talk about the incident? I don't believe it was a punch hole cloud. I'm not convinced it was a craft of extraterrestrial origin either. The American author Liba Bey wrote, "People have a habit of inventing fictions they will believe wholeheartedly in order to ignore the truth they cannot accept." Sometimes, those people who have a habit of inventing fictions in order to ignore the truth they cannot accept are skeptics. And now, I'd like to know what you think. You can contact me here through the website at theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid.